leader means ability to influence thinking. I know lots of people with big titles and nobody's following them. And I know lots of
Oh,
people in the field that don't have a title and lots of people are following them because they're
yeah. And
influential.
you're listening to Titans of the Trades. I'm your host, Ryan Englin, author of Hire Better People Faster and creator of the CoreFit hiring system, a proven process to help growing companies attract and retain only the best. I'm on a mission to revolutionize the perception of the trades and elevate it to new heights. After growing up in a blue-collar family, my passion for making the trades cool again runs deep. If you're a titan in the industry and want to be on my show, stick around until the end and I'll reveal how you can be my next guest. Welcome back to another episode. I am your host, Ryan Englin. And on today's show, I talk with a woman leader in construction. If you've listened to the show for any period of time, you know that I am passionate about bringing more women into the trades. It is one of the fastest, simplest ways that we could actually solve this labor crisis, but we have to do it together. So when I run across a woman leader who is making a dent in this effort to bring more women into construction or into the trades, I definitely want to have them on the show and share some tips and advice. And so today I want you to meet Dr. Gretchen Gagel. Not only is she creating a global institute to help solve this problem, but she is an author, wrote a book called Building Women Leaders, a blueprint for women thriving in construction. And we are going to be talking through some of the actionable things that we can do to work together to solve this labor crisis that we have by bringing more women into the trades. Gretchen, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
We have a lot to talk about today, so I just want to jump right in. Tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and the journey that you've taken to get to where you are right now.
Yeah, well, I was discouraged from studying engineering by my father. He didn't really feel like women should do engineering and, in fact, disowned me when I turned down my Harvard acceptance to go to engineering school instead. Somehow that inspired me to make the decision, first of all, to study engineering and really feel passionately that nobody should be telling anybody what they should or shouldn't do because of what they look like. I was hired out of engineering school after co-oping with Lone Star Gas as Ralston Purina's first female operations manager. Off I went to run a really smelly dog food plant in Oklahoma, a cereal plant in Iowa, and a baby food plant in New York. My first husband and I decided to settle down in Denver, and after my MBA, I joined FMI. 1994, FMI is the largest investment banking strategy firm in the construction industry, and that's when I really fell in love with construction. I've spent almost my entire career advising contractors, large and small, with strategic growth strategies and advising on the client side, the General Motors and Intels of the world, on how to more effectively partner with their contractors. So, yeah, I'm loving construction, and as we were talking about, now I divide my time between Australia and America, and I've really enjoyed getting to know the construction industry in Australia over the last 7 years.
And so this journey has led you to writing a book. And I want to dig into this book a little bit. I know it's not out yet, although by the time this publishes, everybody should be able to get a copy, and we will have the link in the show notes. But tell us a little bit about this book and what motivated you to finally write it.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of crazy. When I moved to Australia, I just finished my PhD in leadership, organization, culture, and change. I was just really curious about how leaders create nimble organizations that can thrive given all the change that's happening in the world. So as you do, I guess I went and did my PhD, and I kind of fell into running a women's leadership program in the pipeline industry. Quanta Services was a client of mine in the US. They own some companies in Australia. They said, hey, join the Pipeline Association. And Wiley Publishing actually found me through my activity on LinkedIn and my podcast and asked me to write this book, which, because as you can imagine, women who've had 40 years in construction and have a PhD in leadership, that's a pretty small subset, right? So they came to me and they said, we don't think there's a book like this on the market. We'd really like for you to write a book about women leading in construction.
Love it. So when you say women leading in construction, tell me a little bit more about that. What are you saying?
Yeah. Well, it's a book. Let me stress one thing right off the bat. It's a book for men and women. The forewords were written by Jan Tuckman, who was editor in chief of E&R magazine for 30 years, and Hugh Rice, who started the investment banking side of FMI. There's lots of men in the book, and it is overall a really great book on leadership. It talks about how to ground your leadership in your values, how to build relationships with people, how to lead teams, how to build cultures, but it's written within the context of women leading in construction as well. The first chapter is about unconscious bias and dominant culture. And
Mm,
really, that's the only difference between men and women in the construction industry. Men make up the majority of the industry, therefore create the dominant culture. And that's not a slam on men. It's not men's fault or anything. It just is. And so people that are outside of that dominant culture may experience unconscious bias, but overall, it's how to find mentors, how to build trust, how to build great teams, all the things we need as leaders in construction.
well, let's talk about unconscious bias. It's something that we run into a lot in the work that we do as we're training leaders and hiring managers. And uh, it's just, I think it's something that people are familiar with. But when we use the word unconscious bias, they're like, I don't know what that means. But when you describe it, they're going to be like, oh, yeah. So tell us a little bit more about unconscious bias. And what are some recommendations you have for people that are struggling with it?
Yeah, we all have bias. We need bias. Bias is like the file folders in your brain that allow you to sort information quickly. So I was on my podcast, I had Howard Ross, who's an unconscious bias specialist. He said, when the car in front of you slams on the brakes, you don't want to have to go to your prefrontal cortex, to your strategic thinking, and take 5 minutes to think, ooh, that's happening. What should I do? You
Yeah.
automatically slam on the brakes, right? So bias helps us sort information because our brains are designed to keep us alive. That is the number one function of our brains. Unconscious bias is not being present to that. So I'll give you a great example. I was working on this chapter and I flew to Washington, D.C. This was last year. I'm in a suit. I get in a shared ride car and the driver says, oh, are you having a busy week? And I said, yep, Kansas City, Chicago, D.C. I'll be on to New York. And he said, oh, are you a flight attendant? And that's just what popped into his mind, right? She travels a lot. She must be a flight attendant.
Mm,
And I said, no, actually, I'm a business executive. And I asked him, I said, do you think you would have asked a man that question if he would have answered that way? And he said, no. And I probably, if I thought he was in aviation, I probably would have thought he was a pilot, right? So that's unconscious bias. That's that sorting of people and things into boxes based on how they look, based on their gender, based on whatever. And so I just encourage people to be present to unconscious bias. When I go out to dinner with a male colleague and I hand them my credit card, what percentage of the time do you think they hand the credit card back to the man at the table?
mm,
Like 90 plus.
yeah.
And it's Gretchen is not like a name that
It's like they're
you,
confused.
it's not a confusing name, but
Yeah.
they are just programmed that when a man and a woman are out to dinner, the man pays for the meal. And that's not a bad thing. They're not trying to be mean, but they just don't stop and think, hey, maybe I should look at the credit card and it will clue me in as to who handed this credit card to me.
One place that I've seen it a lot. So in the work we do at Core Matters, we train recruiting coordinators and hiring managers and even owners sometimes if they're small enough on how to source and screen candidates. And I see them come in and I'm like, why did you reject these three? Like, well, those names are hard to pronounce. So there's no way they have a good grasp of the English language.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And there was one, her resume was so spot on. I remember it was electrical contractor. And I was like, you need to bring her in. I think she can be a great office manager based on her resume, her experience, everything else. He's like, no, there's no way that she's not going to have some thick accent. And he brought her in and he goes, you know what? If you closed your eyes, you'd have thought she was from Texas.
Yeah.
I'm like, because you don't know.
Yeah.
Like we have these biases. And I agree with you. Um,
Assumptions.
we need them, but these unconscious ones, these ones that put people into box, especially incorrectly,
Mm.
That's a real problem that I see we have. And this isn't just the trades, like this is everywhere. It's why they make systems now that remove all of the personally identifiable information like dates and locations of schools and names so that we can just look at people just on, take them at face value and say, hey, based on the type of person we need, this is right.
Yeah.
And our biases aren't going to kick in. So, what are some ways that people are like, you know what? You're right, Gretchen. I have done that. What are some ways, maybe one or two tips that people can start taking control of this so that it doesn't control them?
Yeah. Well, emotional intelligence is really about, and meditation is about training our brains. And having a pause button in our brain is a really, like, if that driver had just paused for a moment and thought, I'm about to ask her if she's a flight attendant, maybe a different question might be, what do you do for a living? And that ability to think before we speak, and I am the worst. I'm the worst at this. I keep saying I'm definitely going to start thinking before I speak, and then I don't do that. But taking time to be present to, um, and empowering people to lift that up, Ryan. So you sometimes, because they're unconscious, and that's what I did with that driver. I just tried to lift that up to him a little bit, right?
Mm.
So holding a mirror up to someone and empowering people around you to say, hey, maybe I mean, I had a woman, we were trying to hire a woman at a women's foundation that I was president of, and she looked at a resume and said, oh, she's been out of the workforce too long. We don't want to take a look at her. And I put that right back in the pile. Um, so yeah, just pausing to think and really empowering others because they can be blind spots.
Yeah.
So as a leader, having there's a great book called Radical Candor by Kim Scott where you're courageous and care. Having
Mm-hmm.
those people around you that care about you and will say, hey, I think you're experiencing some unconscious bias here. Or maybe you're making an assumption that might not be valid.
That is one thing that I've seen a lot is that there are people that can observe it and go, wait a minute, that's a problem. And it creates conversation opportunities, training opportunities. But I think we're so afraid sometimes to say something
Yep.
because we don't want to feel like we're the weird one. But what I found is that usually everybody else is thinking the same thing. I remember one specific situation. We had a general manager who brought this woman in for her second or third interview. She was going to be the office manager, and then finally he just said no. And we're like, "What's going on?" Like she came back multiple times. He goes, "I found out she had two kids."
Hmm.
And I said, "Okay, let's not talk about the legal implications of this,
Yeah.
but what's wrong with that?" And he goes, "I'm afraid that she'll have problems with attendance." And I
Yeah.
said, how many single parents do you know? And he's like, well, not a lot. And I said, some of them are the hardest working, figure it out because there's no one else to take care of it if they're not there. Like, I think you just really let a good one go away. And what by having that conversation with him and leadership about how this, yeah, you can't think like this, uh, it opened up training opportunities for everyone in the company. And so now all of a sudden we're having this conversation that everybody thought, well, that's just the way we've always done it. We've always thought, single parents with kids, like, doesn't matter if it's a mom or a dad, like they're going to have attendance problems. But we start having these conversations and people start going, wait a minute, there's probably a lot of value in hiring single parents with kids because they'll be more committed and loyal and they'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Oh, and I see that so often. And like I said, it's not just the trades, but that's the world I work in. So I see it a lot. Uh, what's something else that we can do? Calling it out, having those people that care, that can do that for us. Is there anything we can do individually, like to work on that ourselves?
Yeah. I think reflecting upon your day. I'm a big fan of journaling and thinking, and we're crazy busy days, right? You and I were talking about this. You were meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting. Um, Even before a meeting, thinking about what assumptions you might be making that you need to be present to before you walk in the room. But then journaling at the end of the day and saying, hey, what assumptions did I make about people, about anything that may or may not be valid, and being able to challenge yourself with your thinking, I think is really important. That self-reflection, it's just a really great tool to develop as a leader. And by the way, leader does not mean title. Leader means ability to influence thinking. I know lots of people with big titles and nobody's following them. And I know lots of
Well,
people in the field that don't have a title and lots of people are following them because they're
yeah.
influential.
And I remind people a lot, often the hardest person to lead is yourself. Like,
Yes, it starts
yeah,
with you.
we like our own ideas, not other people's ideas. And so we kind of get into our own little world of just,
Mhm.
I'm going to keep doing it this way because that's worked for me. Um, but yeah, I have seen that. One of the things I like to share with people is to be curious. And I think that, and just that reminder of being curious, I think about that driver. He could have just been curious. Where are you off to today? What do you do for a living? Like you said, like reframe the question.
Yeah.
And there's so many other ways we could be curious. Oh, you've got, found out you're a single parent. Let's talk about some of those challenges and how you've overcome them instead of just
Mhm.
making assumptions,
Yeah.
which I think is where we get in a lot of trouble. So you've had a long career. Uh, it sounds like there was a lot of work early on in like the manufacturing space and then moved into construction. What are some of the things or perceptions that you've seen throughout that time of women in construction? And what progress have we made? And where do we still have a lot of work to do? And I guess the first thing I would ask, is it better or worse or the same that it's been over the last 20 years? Like, how are we doing?
Yeah, it's better. I mean, it's been 42 years since I started as an engineering intern, the only female engineering intern at Lone Star Gas.
Mm.
So in 40 years, I think it's definitely gotten better. I think we're actually doing fairly well in like the project management, project engineer level. The trades I'm starting a new global institute called Women Thriving in Construction, a global institute. And we are partnering with FMI and NCCER to put out a study on US trades. And I just received the data for it last week. 2.4% of electricians are women, and that's up from 2.1% 10 years ago. So in 10 years, we've gone from 2.1 to 2.4. I think plumbers is 1.9. So we have significant challenges in the trades, and we have significant challenges at the very high end in boards. I have my last Brinkman Construction board meeting next Monday. I've been on the board 7 years and I've chaired it for 3. Paul Brinkman asked me to be the first independent chair of the board. And after 2 years, they asked me to extend by a year. So I must have been doing something right as chair of the board. But I don't see a lot of other women chairing boards and owning construction companies. So I think the real opportunities are at the trade level and the senior leadership level. Your first question, though, my experiences, I was hired as president of a company in 2014 by 2 men who had started the company. And after I was hired, doing the same strategic consulting and construction, almost every week someone would ask me, are you a woman-owned business? And I'd say, no, we're not a woman-owned, an officially certified woman-owned business. Well, why did Mark and Clark hire you as president? And because I'm the most qualified person to be president of this company, they felt I was much more qualified for what they needed out of a president than they were. But that's the kind of experience. And what I hear from women in construction, it's exhausting to have to reprove yourself in a way that maybe a white male doesn't have to answer that question almost every week. You just it wears on you after a while. Why doesn't anybody think they'd just hire me as president of the company because I'm qualified to be president of the company?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Maybe there's some of those biases we talked about kick it in there, right?
Yes, exactly.
Um, wow. Okay. So you talked about having, I would call it like male allies. I mean,
Ooh.
those guys hired you to run the
Oh
company
yeah.
because you were the most qualified. Uh, how can men actually actively support and promote the advancement of women in construction? What do
There
we need to start doing?
there are so many here. I'm going to start with little ways. The most uh, common microaggression against women in the workplace is being spoken over. And I saw this happening in a job site trailer a couple of years ago, where a young assistant project manager, female, was trying to deliver a report and would get one sentence into it and then would be, off to the races with the male project manager. And so after a while, I just gracefully said, hey, could we go back to her idea? Could we, just being able to redirect when you see a woman not being respected in a meeting. Hey, I think Gretchen had a really good idea. Let's listen to this. Being present, but you have to be present. Some people noticed that that was happening, some people didn't. I think my first boss at FMI, 1994, I was woman number two out of 170 consultants. We had contractors that said, I don't think you're sending Gretchen out to do my strategic plan. I need like a John or a David. And his answer to them was, well, then you're going to need to find another consulting firm because Gretchen's an important member of our team. And that I realize now in 1994 was an incredible thing for him to be doing. And I've had incredible male allies that an ally is somebody that stands up for you. They say nice things about you when you're not in the room and they protect you and your respect. And it is, Ryan, fundamentally about respect. We had a female project manager and a framer whistled at her and she went in the trailer and I think I might have been whistled at. I'm not really sure. And one of our male young superintendents went out and called all 150 framers down and said, that's our boss and you need to treat her with respect. So I think a
Mhm.
lot of this goes back to how are we treating everyone on our job sites like humans in a respectful way that brings a professionalism to um, to our trades and our projects.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about that respect. I've seen it and I've heard many stories. I mean, even the men don't respect each other a lot of times based on their tenure or how long they've been there or just the jobs they're working on. But they always seem to turn it into something that is incredibly inappropriate when a woman is on the job site. Like it's almost like that good old boys club and we're okay with it and we just don't talk about it and we have fun and it's not fun. It's inappropriate and crossing boundaries and those kinds of things. But I love that you've got those stories of those people that not only stood up for you, but that you're still seeing the next generation of men standing up for those women and saying, hey, this is how we do it.
Yeah.
So as I start to think about the next generation of workers in the trades,
Mhm.
whether they're on a leadership path or they're on more of the knowledge path of construction, but they're just looking at construction as a career opportunity. What advice do you have for aspiring women leaders that are looking at career in construction?
It's a great industry. When my girlfriends ask me why I'm in construction, I say to them, do you enjoy charging your cell phone? Do you enjoy driving on a road, eating in a restaurant, sitting in a high rise? It's all constructed. We build and maintain the assets of society. There is such pride in knowing that you are a part of making something. I've worked on the Baltimore Ravens Stadium, I've worked on golf courses and hotels and hospitals and light rails. And it's all society. We build civilization. Finding what you're passionate about and working with your hands, whether that's as a welder, pipe fitter, electrician, carpenter, is so gratifying if you're a spatial person and you really get satisfaction from building something and being able to stand back at the end of the day and say, hey, I was a part of this team. I made this light rail happen. I made this airport happen. It's just a wonderful, wonderful industry. And we just need women to know that they can belong in it and they can excel in it. And there are lots of women examples doing that.
Yeah. One of my favorite things when I visit clients is they'll usually drive me around town like, we built that, we built that, we did that.
Yeah.
I'm like, yes, the amount of just that proud moment. They were just like, yes, my team was a part of that. I was a part of that. Like they just love it. And you're right. We there's this thing going around, especially with the high school students and everything. Oh, it's better to be a knowledge worker, go get an office job, go work for Facebook or Amazon. It's like those companies would be nothing without the electricians and the contractors and the construction companies that built this infrastructure. They'd have nothing.
Yeah, the
Um,
trades are the knowledge workers. And I was flying from Melbourne to Helsinki through Doha, and I started taking selfies with the orange tape around moving sidewalks and escalators that were down. because there's a shortage. There's a shortage of moving sidewalk and escalator mechanics. There's a shortage of a lot of different things in America. And so I probably saw 6 different escalators not working in those 3 cities. We It's a societal challenge too. We need people that can fix elevators. We need people that can fix air conditioning, that can lay a road and do all those things. And they are knowledge workers. It is a thing to be so proud of, to be able to put construction in place. Just
Yeah.
amazing.
All right. As we get ready to wrap up here, the thing that's going through my mind right now is I can picture there are people listening to this going, you know what, Gretchen, you're so right. There is so much opportunity. There's so much we can do. People have heard me say this. You want to solve the labor crisis? Let's invite all those women in
Yeah.
to work in the trades. 1.9%. Like there's no women plumbers. Let's get women in plumbing. And I've met a few women plumbers, and uh, the way that their leaders will talk about them, they put up better numbers, they work faster, customers like them more. Like it's crazy. It's like, why aren't we doing more of this? So for those entrepreneurs and those leaders thinking, you know what, Gretchen, you're right. I want to do something. I want to be a part of the solution here. What is some advice that you have at the business level
Mhm.
that these companies could start doing to change the reputation of the industry, or influence that narrative a little bit so that the women go, you know what, that is a viable opportunity, and that's someone that I want to go learn more about it from.
Yeah.
What are some advice you have for those people?
They have to start with their own culture. I did a great podcast with Sam Clark, who's the CEO of Clark Construction in Lansing, small Clark, not big Clark. And he sent 18 of his leaders through training to understand things like unconscious bias, because if you're going to invite them in and they're in an atmosphere where they're not going to thrive, they're going to leave. So you have to create the environment first and really understand what respect and belonging looks like for every type of person that you're trying to invite in. And then I think you need to get really creative about where you're looking for people, and how there's a lot of talk about we have to get them in middle school. And I agree, we need to attract people into the construction industry when they're young. But there's lots of ways to reach out to nonprofit organizations that are working to get women back into the workforce and partner with them so that your organization is seen as a viable option.
Yeah, one of the things that I think we could do as well is those young families
Mm.
work on mom and dad,
Yeah.
because they have more influence than any commercial or social media account or something like that might have. And they could influence the kids in the trades too. I see, especially with the generation that's in here now, the millennials and Gen Z, a lot of their parents are like, I don't want my kids going in the trades.
Yeah. Well, and
That's not a good job.
yeah, I heard a great story of one of the ABC chapters in the South going after high school girls and their low income moms as buddies so that they would
Mm,
have a buddy system going into apprenticeship. And that's the kind of creativity I'm talking about. Like,
yeah.
let's build in these support systems. So if you bring one woman in and she's the only woman, that's very challenging. How do you bring 3 women in at once so they have
Yeah.
a support network?
And to think about bringing in that low income mom and her daughter, I mean, you're changing a family tree at that point. And
Yes,
that's the
you
stuff that
are.
gets me really excited.
Yeah.
I mean, that's huge. So, Gretchen, this has been amazing. I'm sure we could keep going on and on about this, but I know there are people that want to know about your book.
Yep.
They want to know about this institute that you're working on. Like, share with us, how can we learn more? How can we get a hold of you? Where can we find your book?
Yeah. Well, my website is gretchengagel.com. Everything about Gretchen Gagel, Gagel. Everyone always wants to make it an LE, but it's Gagel. The book is available for pre order on Amazon. It's called Building Women Leaders, a blueprint for women thriving in construction. Building women leaders. And yeah, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn on these topics as well.
This has been so great. Thank you so much for all of the wisdom that you've gathered over the years, and just your passion and commitment to the industry. I know we're making dents, but we're gonna get there. And thanks to people like you. So thank you for
Thanks.
being on the show today.
Thanks, Ryan. I really appreciate you having me.
Ryan Englin here. Thank you so much for listening to Titans of the Trades. If you're a titan in the construction, manufacturing, or skilled trades industry and would like to be a guest on my show, please visit podcast.corematters.com. If you found value in this interview, would you share this episode on social media? Just do a quick screenshot on your phone and share it with a friend or post it on social. And if you know someone that would be a great guest, tag them on social media to let them know about the show and include the hashtag Titans of the Trades. I love seeing your posts and guest suggestions. We are regularly putting out new episodes and content. To make sure you don't miss any episodes, click the subscribe button. Your thumbs up, ratings, and reviews go a long way to help promote the show and get me one step closer to solving the labor crisis facing the industry. Want to know more about how we're doing that? Go to our website or follow me on LinkedIn. Thanks for listening.